What, you know what? Just to be safe thing you did ended up saving you later. Story 1. It was late at night and she was delivering pizza in a shady part of town. Large residential complex with several buildings approaching the entrance. 100 feet behind me, heading in my direction, I observed 2 men wearing black attire. As I finally got to her door, I heard the apartment complex's main entrance open and shut. Delivery was on the 2nd level. She ordered using a credit card and left a cash tip. In order to be cautious, I actually withdrew the remaining cash out of my bag where I kept my cash and placed it inside of my jacket pocket, just keeping the change I had that night. 2 men stepped out from behind the steps and urged me to give them the money as the bag began to down the stairs and return to my vehicle. One of the men had a revolver aimed at me. They hurriedly headed towards the rear door of the apartment complex after I hastily gave them my bag of quarters. I'd never in my life run back to my vehicle that quickly. I wanted to get as far away as I could be before they knew they had stolen $3.50 in quarters from me. Story 2. I dropped off my high school sweetheart. I then locked the passenger door for some reason. A shady-looking man attempted to unlock the door when I was stopped at a red light less than 10 minutes later. I have no clue why. When she left, I shut the door. I wasn't very prone to doing that. I have no clue what would have occurred if the man had boarded my vehicle. I had a similar event. I was leaving my pal at his house. He resided in a dubious area. After he exited, I instantly shut the other door since I had the driver's side one locked. Suddenly, 3 females sprint out of the woods and attempt to open the doors of my vehicle. I can shoot the one who hopped on my hood. She dismounted my automobile. The other woman threw her drink at the driver's side door of my car. The thought of what they were about to do to me makes me afraid. Story 3. My father once misplaced his spectacles. He was only going to utilize his existing prescription, but at the last minute he made the decision to go to the eye doctor just in case. He was scheduled for surgery within 24 hours after it was discovered that he had a tear in his retina. Even worse, if they hadn't found it, they said that he would have gone blind very quickly. At the time. Story 4. A family friend who had a heart attack and needed key PR was brought back after being unconscious for 15 minutes. Thanks to the PR that was administered, she only sometimes experienced memory lapses and mainly simply forgot about that day. Years later, she continues to operate. Story 5. I was having some gastrointestinal problems, so my doctor recommended a colonoscopy to check things out. 1 polyp was detected, nothing major, hardly relevant to the issue at hand, and advised me to return in 5 years just in case I set a Google reminder and forgot about it. I underwent a colonoscopy 5 years later, and they discovered a lot more. They stated that if I hadn't gone, I would have definitely had cancer in the next 5 to 20 years. Instead, they eliminated all polyps, and as a result of having a condition they found, I now routinely have colonoscopies. Because I am much over the age at which a colonoscopy is typically performed, I would have most certainly developed cancer at that time. Story 6. My mother was throwing up in the bathroom as I was getting ready for school. She said that her arm ached, but otherwise claimed that it was just a stomach ailment and to simply go to school. I dialed the ambulance from downstairs because I felt off. When they got there, they loaded her into the ambulance. After 3 more cardiac arrests in which she required defibrillators at each one, she had a double bypass and was back to normal activity within a month. If I hadn't phoned, the paramedics informed me she would have passed within 5 minutes after I left. Story 7. Snow chains near the mountain's base. On the way up, numerous vehicles passed me with multiple warnings on a clear road. Even though there was no snow in the region, I spotted a local putting on chains as I climbed. I chose to put them on out of caution. I found myself in some of the worst snow driving conditions I've ever seen 30 minutes later. Snowfall and whiteout conditions ultimately led to a complete closure of the roads. With just enough traction to feel somewhat secure traveling at 15E, I passed car crash after car crash. Chains are required for anyone traveling to Tahoe, but suitable chains are hard to find. I couldn't care less whether you drive a four-wheeler. It's dangerous to travel across Mammoth and Tahoe during snowstorms, going from a cloudless, brilliant day to a dazzling white night in 1 hour. If Siri offers you a snow-covered hell that seems too steep when you're close to paradise, ignore it. Do a U-turn. You won't succeed until you are properly set up. Chains for snow are not. You'll scuttle. Just board the Horace gondola. Choose another resort if the conditions are so poor and you don't already have your own equipment. Renters and newbies in general should avoid heavenly. Story 8. I had a female patient who was coming for I-131 treatment. The patient had to be free of pregnancy, and a blood test was required 1 day before the dose. I looked at the bad findings that were shown on the screen. Just in case, I printed it out and placed it in the patient file. After providing her radiation safety warnings and releasing her, despite the fact that we went paperless years previously, she returned a few days later claiming to be late. Another pregnancy blood test was administered by the doctor, and the results were positive. The laboratory worker converted the prior negative blood test to a positive one. Yeah, I may lose my job if it seemed that I dosed the patient when she was pregnant. Prior to this occurrence, co-workers would tease me for being too cautious. Everyone began publishing the findings after this occurrence. Story 9. Usually I give in to social pressure very easily, but this one time when I was younger, I was out with my friends and a few of older high school boys I had just met that day. The females were all swooning over them, but when they all expressed a desire to go on a drive with the men, I knew they were all complete morons. Well, I don't trust these men. Maybe I should simply call my folks and go home, I reason. The next morning, one of the females who was a passenger gave me a call. A high school kid was operating the vehicle. One of the girls wasn't buckled up during the catastrophic collision, struck her head on the dashboard, and spent 6 months in a coma. She spent years receiving intense treatment and rehabilitation. I still find it hard to comprehend how many days I chose to defy convention. Terribly unhappy about my buddy, yet I believe it saved my life. Even though we were quite close, she never arrived on time. Her character also altered. If it hadn't happened to her, I still wonder how successful she may have been, and if we would still be friends. So depressing. Story 10. This is a similar tale. One night, my girlfriend persuaded me to go out drinking with 3 older kids. I chose to spend the evening at home. They drove while intoxicated. In the dead of winter around midnight, they fell. My fiancée was discovered by a bus driver after spending more than 8 hours sleeping in the snow. She lost any movement below the waist. The collision claimed the lives of the 2 men. Extremely disturbing image, terrible deaths. Never ever drive after drinking. Story 11. I was watching my little nephew when I saw that he had begun playing with a metal straw that he had discovered in the home. He was only tapping and gesticulating with objects. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that less than 5 minutes later, he collapsed like a child, and I saw the silicone straw completely smashed into his face. After that little interruption, I was forced to sit still. Story 12. My dad, my brothers, and I were traveling by car in Central America. We were visiting him at night on a highway when it was cloudy. There was no moon, and there were no lights. No one loves driving on new highways like this one. Although thieves often place glass or spikes to damage tires and rob you or worse, let's move on. When we were moving, this man pulled over and waved for assistance. The man requested if we could light up his vehicle while he replaced a flat tire after my dad stopped behind him because he was terrified. He had every reason to be afraid of being by himself out there. My sister grabbed my dad as he tried to go to assist and stated she didn't believe this felt right. Dad told us that everything would be all right and nearly left, but my sister grabbed him once more. Just then, a vehicle sped by the entrance where he was supposed to be. 4 men leap out. The others rush to our vehicle as one takes the guy and places a pistol to his head. However, their outdated Corolla couldn't keep up with our Jeep during the short pursuit along the highway and gave up after 2 to 3 minutes of traveling at 170 kilometers per hour. By forcing my dad to remain in the vehicle, my sister likely saved his life as well as ours. The additional 5 seconds. Story 13. One day I was making karaoke, kind of fried monkey from the Philippines for the first time. Once I placed them in the oil, I sat down and kept a close eye on them. I never use an apron while I'm cooking, but this time I thought, why not? They all erupted as soon as I moved away from the fryer. It turns out that when fried, karaoke may produce an impenetrable shell which caused pressure to build up within the fruit until it burst, sprinkling hot oil all over the kitchen. Of course, it was entirely perplexed since I was safely away and grabbing for an apron. Puncture a few holes in this batch and each one that follows. Naturally, I ate them after cleaning the kitchen, and they were great. A perfect 10, very recommended. Story 14. Wore a helmet as a child while biking down a mountain. I didn't normally do that. As a result of my high-speed crash, I broke my helmet and lost 3 teeth. Maybe it was in my brain. It was faulty. Story 15. Lived at the time in Baltimore. After a late shift, I pulled up in front of my apartment and had to fetch a bag out of the trunk before entering. Nope. I thought as I spotted some teenagers hanging out on the corner, called my roommate, and asked her to come watch me approach the door. A girl who claims she was unjustly jumped by the group of kids arrives on the scene bleeding about 10 minutes later and runs down the street. Be careful out there. Story 16. I left a spare set of keys in the bar above where I reside. On St. Patrick's Day, I went out and my coat was taken. Around 3 in the morning, I make out while keeping my keys. I truly have no clue how I would have gotten home without it. That wasn't quite a life-saving event, but it was nonetheless a relief. Story 17. This one isn't about me. It's about a colleague who was using a crowbar to split some railroad ties as part of his yard work when one burst. A nail shot out and lodged itself in one of the lenses of his safety glasses, which he put on for work. On his desk, he keeps them. Remember, folks, PP is not only for the office. Story 18. Before I left on a vacation where I had to pull my boat trailer for more than 400 miles, I had the boat repair shop dealer repack my boat trailer's bearings. As I had a long journey ahead of me, I decided to have the professionals repack the bearings since I typically do it myself. I made the decision to confirm that the bearing case was fully lubricated the day before I went. Without it, they would overheat, leaving me stuck and in the danger of a trailer wheel actually coming off. If I hadn't noticed, there would have been no oil at all throughout the trip. If any of the 4 wheels had a bearing case, I would have been fortunate to get 20 miles before anything major occurred. Also, I have a long-standing practice of checking my pocket for my keys before shutting a closed door at home, my vehicle, etc. Story 19. My mother, not my ass. I was getting ready to attend a party when she and I were home alone. As I went upstairs, I discovered her on the coffee table with the carbon monoxide detector broken. She reported hearing a beep. And allegedly, one malfunctioned and sent a false alert at our last home years ago. She probably thought it was occurring again because of this. I dismissed it and carried on getting dressed. I was going to depart when I became distracted by something. She kept repeating how great it was. She and I argued for a while until I finally declared no, we're contacting the fire department. Then I did. When they arrived, they declared that anybody sleeping in the basement would already be dead since the levels of carbon monoxide were so high. We were unaware that our cats were vomiting as a result of the poisoning. I suppose the furnace's filter was so clogged that it was spewing carbon monoxide. I was taken aside by a fireman who said that my mother would have been dead in her bed if he had been summoned. Story 20. I was mudding on some land while riding a side vehicle. I was in town with a buddy during a riot. Hey, you should definitely fasten your seatbelt just in case, I said as I turned to face my buddy. He lost control immediately after that, sliding as quickly as this monster could go into a tree front first. Under the circumstances, we were both okay, but the side-by-side was destroyed. The next moment, he turned to face me with eyes the size of dinner plates. Story 21. Before touring a national forest with a traveling companion, I saved the GP's position of my car on Google Maps. We gathered some fishing gear and set out towards the closest body of water shown on our map in the hopes of catching a few fish. That was a marsh, not a lake as it turned out. And because of how drastically we turned around, things might have gone extremely wrong. We actually didn't go that far from our parking spot, yet we somehow managed to find ourselves on the other side of the marsh without realizing it. When we spotted the vehicle, it was pouring rain. There were bare footprints, and the sun had already begun to set. With no GP's coordinates recorded, at the very least it would have been a chilly, rainy night in the woods, and search and rescue would very certainly have been necessary. Story 22. I worked alone to shut a casino that also offered video poker. Unknown man entered and struck up a conversation with me. I was acting like I was supposed to, nice and courteous to everyone who walked in. I made the decision to contact my partner and a friend before feeling compelled to snap a photo of the man. I was behind as he proceeded toward the counter. As the buddy in question was awake, I quickly emailed one to her. She contacted me right away while driving the 20 minutes to my work an hour before I was scheduled to start. I should note that I didn't drive, so there wasn't a car in the now empty parking lot that belonged to me. His automobile was the only one there, and it was neatly parked right close to the entrance. 2 days later, a missing persons report was made public about a person with a very similar build and facial traits who was allegedly trafficking around the neighborhood. Later that evening, she vanished. Once my buddy arrived, he went. I've never felt so nervous in my life, and I really believe that sending those letters saved my life. He was standing by the front door waiting for me to get home from work at 1 in the morning. Story 23 may seem absurd, but there was a specific day in a very hard winter many years ago when I was required to do community service in Germany as an alternative to obligatory military duty. Because the snow and ice had been cleaned from the roadways, I often rode my bike to work. Well, I didn't remove my helmet on this particular day because I began shoveling snow as soon as I got to my workplace and didn't even go inside first. My location of employment was a large, rambling, 4-story hostel amid the woods. There was a thick layer of snow covering the roof, and the gutters were draped with enormous icicles. I made the decision to wear my helmet and seemed foolish when a colleague questioned me about it. I playfully retorted that it was for security purposes. A little while later, an ice block dropped and struck my head and shoulders. I dropped to my knees as a result of the impact's brutality. My head was unharmed, but my shoulders were injured. What may have occurred if I hadn't donned my silly bicycle helmet for amusement that morning? I honestly have no idea. Definitely severe injury. I want subculture to dominate culture, story 24. This passage was taken from a crucial research study. Because of potential patent liability, we were expressly instructed not to do that. Yet even so, I had a sneaking suspicion that we might need another plate cultured. And lo and behold, a student dropped the plate inadvertently in the lab, shattering it. Saved us from fines and 6 months of delay. Story 25. I saw the street was flooded during a storm and decided to relocate my vehicle farther up the driveway as I was leaving. Just to be careful, I went to the restroom first since I suddenly got the desire to defecate, perhaps after 30 seconds. My automobile was crushed when the neighbor's tree crashed squarely on it. Story 26 was traveling around the neighborhood on a dune buggy equipped with a roll cage, just to be safe on a motocross helmet. The side of the helmet that struck the pavement when we crashed was entirely white since all of the paint had been stripped off. Story 27. There are occasions when I absolutely must bring something with me the following morning. I assume that because it's so important, I'll remember it without a doubt, so I'll place the item on top of my vehicle keys out of precaution. And sure, it has saved me a few times. Story 28. My buddy was expecting his first kid with his wife. To make things simpler, they received a sizable package of data and documentation that needed to be completed prior to the deadline. Also, there were pamphlets about genetic testing and other options. One of the topics was the preservation of cord blood. According to my acquaintance, his wife inquired whether they should do it after he glanced at the brochure's cover. My buddy answered absolutely, but it is not cheap. It will cost you a few $1,000s to save it and a few hundred each year after that. Later that year, 3 years after she was born, their daughter was born. A son was delivered to them with an immunological problem. His older sister's cord blood and stem cells were employed as a therapy since he had no white cell. Story 29. At the age of 42, my dad, not I, purchased a $500K life insurance policy. He was made fun of, often called insane, etc., so he responded by saying what he did simply to be safe. His seizure occurred. At the age of 43, July 2007. At 44, a brain tumor claimed her life on June 28. In less than 2 years, the insurance was fully paid. When I turned 21, I've had life insurance. My father passed away much too early from cancer, which ran in my family.